Okay, so now we're in this strange in-person hybrid service where what are the, at least in terms of the way that I've been approaching, what are the priorities that we have here? Well, one, we want to connect Geula to Tefilah. So we want to have kind of a seamless transition, into the Amidah. We need to make sure that people who can say the Amidah on their own can do so. We need to make sure that people who need to rely on the Shaliach Tzibur can do so. And now that we've got a minyan, we need to be able to say the Kedushat as well. So what do we do in this And the final consideration is we're trying to, as much as possible, keep the length of our services down. So how do we do it? So then we do what's called a Hechi Kedusha, which is where we start the Amidah out loud. So everybody starts the Amidah out loud together with the Shaliach Tzibur. And then we go straight through the Kedusha, the standing Kedusha. And then when I get to the end, I say that closing blessing, Ha'el HaKadosh. And then as the leader, I'm now going to continue on with my Amidah silently. So now you have choices, right? So if you are in person with me, right, you can recite the Amidah along with me at the very beginning. And then when I finish up on my own, you just could, you do the exact same thing. You continue on to the end on your own. If you are at home, actually, if you're at home, you've got the same option. Unfortunately, if the person who wanted to rely on me to say the blessings and they say Amen is not going to have that opportunity in this version because I'm not reciting the ending part of the Amidah out loud. So, but the hope is that it's, we've already covered the first 2 pages out loud, and whether in Hebrew or in English, people will be able to finish it up on their own. So lots of permutations, but I'll just say that there is a reason for all of it that does make sense, but it certainly can get complicated.
And are you just reading the Amidah once in this service? Or
so when we do the Hechi Kedusha, we're not repeating. We're going straight through the entire thing, and the first 2 pages are done out loud.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rabbi, what does Hechi mean?
Hechi, I don't know. It's spelled Hoeche in English. It is, I believe, a Yiddish word.
Okay.
And I'm actually not sure what the word means.
Okay.
So
I've heard it before, and I figured out that it meant you start together and then the end is silent, but I didn't know what it meant.
That's what it means.
Which was, I didn't hear it. Which one was the word?
Hechi. It's a Yiddish word. In English, I see it spelled Hoeche. And I'm not sure what the word actually means.
You don't think it comes from Chetzi?
I don't.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask about in vain, because when I was a kid, you don't say the Lord's name in vain. I thought that you don't say God damn. I thought it was a curse. I don't know you're not allowed to say it. What exactly saying a prayer twice is bad?
Yeah, bracha levatala. Batel means nullified or canceled. And it's the idea that when we say a bracha, we're fulfilling a mitzvah. And if we say a bracha at an inappropriate time, then we are invoking God's name, which is holy, at a time when it's not appropriate. And so we have, so that's a problem, right? And so the rabbis are concerned with not doing that. And that's, I guess, similar to the idea of not, saying God's name just in everyday conversation. But it's not exactly the same. But bracha levatala is its own thing.
Rabbi, I would like to ask, what's the main logic for the Shliach Tzibur repeating the Amidah. So what is the main reason for that? Is it because somebody missed it or somebody doesn't know how to pray?
I think it's for the person who doesn't know how to pray. Right, which as we've talked about was, until the printing press was probably a majority of the people in the community.
And how do you retain kavanah when you're doing it twice so many times?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. And actually that's the invention of the Hechi Kedusha was a reaction to that problem. Because what was happening is, this was true especially on Rosh Hashanah, which has a very long Musaf Amidah in Egypt, where I may have mentioned this before, that there was, they were doing the silent Amidah and just a small number of people actually had the ability to do that. And then the Shliach Tzibur would chant the whole thing out loud. And then the people who had already done the Amidah, they would sit in the back talking and setting a really bad example for everybody else. And so Maimonides was asked about this. And so he issued a responsum, a teshuvah, creating the Hechi Kedusha, which basically meant that we were only going to do one Amidah entirely out loud. And the scholars would have to pray along with the Shaliach Tzibur. And that way they wouldn't misbehave.
Rabbi, maybe I have the solution for this Hechi Kedusha. In Yiddish, hoich, it's high.
High, okay.
Yeah, so because you say it in high voice, in loud voice. So hoich in Yiddish, it's high, like a high voice.
Yeah, it's like in German. It's
hoich kol, yeah.
I've been trying to figure out how I can translate that from Yiddish into German. So hoch in Yiddish, or hoch would be German, would be H-O-C-H, which is high. So if it's hochi or hochi, it could be high something.
Yeah,
I looked it up online.
All right.
And it is high. Yiddish term combining German and Hebrew, meaning literally the high Kedusha, refers to a way to shorten the time it takes to say the Amidah by avoiding the necessity of having the prayer leader repeat it all after it is said silently by the congregation.
Okay, well, there you go. the high Kedusha, right?
The whole topic.
Okay, so earlier, if you recall, we already have dealt with one Kedusha, and that was the Kedusha de Yeshiva, the sitting Kedusha. And we saw that during Shacharit. In the weekday Siddur, it was on page 31. So this is within the first blessing before the Shema, the Yotzer Or blessing. We talk about God fashioning light. And if you remember, we talked about all of the angels and the planets and praising God for creation. And then we had this little Kedusha where we have the Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh line and the Baruch Kevod line. And what we're doing is we're describing what the angels do, the way that the angels praise God. So we're doing it kind of in the third person. We're not ourselves doing the praising. It's kind of more of a narrative. So that's referred to as the Kedusha de Yeshiva, the sitting Kedusha.
That's the one in the Shacharit, Rabbi?
That's the one in Shacharit.
On page 110?
110 for Shabbat and 31 for a weekday.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's called the Kedusha de Yeshiva, probably because we're sitting down when we say it. Next is the Kedusha de Amidah. That's the one in the Amidah. Kedusha, the standing Kedusha, right? Yeshiva is sitting, Amidah is standing. Right? Pretty straightforward. And there's one more Kedusha. Anybody know where it is? Or when it is? When in the service it is? It's not on Shabbat. So you have to attend weekday services to hear it. Well, in our Siddur for weekdays, it's on page 80. It's called the Kedusha de Sidra. And it's in a prayer that begins Uva L'Tzion Goel. It's kind of at the end of the service, right before we get to Aleinu. And here we have the same lines from Isaiah and Ezekiel, where the angels are proclaiming God's holiness, the same ones that we saw earlier. The difference is that we're translating them here into Aramaic. So we say the line in Hebrew, and then we translate the line into Aramaic. And so this prayer came in at a time when probably most people spoke Aramaic. And so we wanted to make sure that people understood it. And it's called Kedusha de Sidra. A Seder is like the order, right? Sidra is like a section of text that we've just learned. And what I read about this, and we're not going to go into detail on this, but that there was a time when each day there was a short teaching of some sort of passage from the prophets, from Nevi'im, on a weekday basis. And, maybe for time considerations, that eventually was removed. But these lines of declarations of holiness, which come from the prophets, were retained in this prayer, in the Kedusha de Sidra, as a way to make sure that people are getting some study of Nevi'im from the prophets every day, and which helps us understand why it was translated into Aramaic, right? If people don't understand the Hebrew, if we translate into Aramaic, the language they do understand, then we're ensuring that people have a chance to learn from the Nevi'im every day. We've already seen many examples of passages from the Torah being included as kind of these kind of ritualized study. And so here we see passage from the prophets that is included in a similar kind of way. So that's called the Kedusha de Sidra. All right, so now we're going to look at the Kedusha de Amidah, the weekday version. So this is going to be on page 37 in the weekday Amidah. For Shabbat, it's going to be on like page 5, something like that. Miriam, you can correct. I don't have that Siddur right in front of me at the moment. Do you find it? Get it, Miriam?
I'm looking.
It's on 4, page 4.
Okay, great.
Page 4, okay.
Page 4. Okay, so here are the mechanics. We're let's say we're doing a repetition of the Amidah. So the Shaliach Tzibur does the first 2 blessings out loud, gets to the end of Gvurot, which ends with Mechayeh HaMeitim, right? You bring life to the dead, and then turns the page and begins the standing Kedusha. All right, so this is what it looks like. Nikadesh et shimcha ba'olam. There we go. Change the size of my head. Nikadesh et shimcha ba'olam. We will sanctify your name on earth. Kashem shemakdishimo tobishmei marom. Just as they sanctify it in the highest heavens, right? They, presumably the angels. Kakatuv al yad neviyecha, as it is written by the hand of your prophet. And then Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Maloch al haaretz kevodo. I'm going to bring myself down. How about that? So as we can see, this is from the prophet Isaiah. And we studied these in a bit more detail when we were looking at the Kedusha de Yeshiva earlier. So I won't go through all the issues around translating this, but this is what Isaiah sees when he has his vision in the Holy of Holies of the divine throne room, where he sees the seraphim, these seraph angels who are proclaiming God's holiness. So what have we done as for the introduction? So we're going to proclaim your holiness, we human beings, just like they do up in heaven. And how do we know? It's because the prophet reported it to us. So now, unlike the Kedusha de Yeshiva, we are the ones who are doing the proclaiming of holy. So maybe that's why we stand up, right? We need to be in a more exalted state. And then Lu'umatam Baruch Yomeru. Lu'umatam is to the ones in front of them, right? To the ones who are opposite them. Baruch Yomeru. They say blessed, right? Baruch. So when we say Baruch here, what are we saying? Like what's the syntax of this? That's the question. So, and then the response is Baruch Kavod Adonai Mimkomo from Ezekiel. Blessed is the glory of the Lord from his place. So this Le'umatam Baruch Yomeru is a little bit confusing. Those facing them say blessed. Say blessed. Any ideas what's going on here?
Facing the angels, maybe?
Who is facing the angels?
God.
That's not those, though.
Yeah. So in Isaiah, the angels are the seraphim. In Ezekiel, we have other kinds of angels. If you remember, there were seraphim, there were ophanim, and chayot hakodesh, holy beings. So it seems that we've got different cadres of angels, and it's like a sing down, right? So the seraphim, they get theirs in, and they say, "Over to you, ophanim," and the ophanim they come in with Baruch.
I could see an opera in the making. Yes.
Oh, totally, right? So it's what it is. Lumatam Baruch. So the ones facing him, they say the Baruch line, right? So that's why I put Baruch in quotation marks here, right? So what is Baruch? Oh, that's the line from Ezekiel, right? So now the Ophanim are gonna throw down their line, Baruch Kavod Adonai Mimakomo. And then Uvdivrei Kodshecha Katuv Lemor, and in your holy words, it is written saying, and then we have Yimloch Adonai Leolam Elohayach Tzion Ledor Vador. Hallelujah. All right, this we did not have earlier, but this is from Psalms. So we have the Lord will reign forever, your God, Zion, in every generation. Hallelujah. All right, so we've got 3 different quotes from Bible, 2 from the prophets, 1 from Psalms. How would you characterize these 3? What's the theme or themes that we're covering?
Holiness and glory.
Holiness and glory. Shlomo, it looks like you're talking, but you're on mute.
Sanctification. Yeah, I think the theme is praising God.
Okay, and can we go? Is there any? So let's.
Forever. Also.
What's the setting? What's the setting of each of these 3? How about Isaiah?
Up in heaven.
Down on earth.
Earth, right? The fullness of the earth is God's glory.
As opposed to up
right?
in the heaven.
Now, what is about the next one from Ezekiel? That's from God's place, right? So that's in heaven. So we've got kind of the lower realms, we've got the upper realms, and now what's the third one? Time. Right.
And then there's generation too.
Okay. So this expression, Lador Vador, to generation and generation, it's a poetic way of saying forever.
Okay.
Right. We're going to do this in every single generation throughout time is going to be praising your name. Okay. And then we've got the conclusion, Lador Vador Nagid Godlecha. There we see the expression again. For generation to generation, or really in every generation, Nagid Godlecha, we will declare your greatness. Ulenetzach netzachim, Kedushatcha nakdish. And for eternity of eternities, we will sanctify your holiness. So note just generation and eternity are set up as kind of parallel words here. V'shivchacha Eloheinu, and your praise, our God, mipinu lo yamush leolam va'ed, from our mouths shall not depart forever and ever. Ki el melech gadol v'kadosh ata, for God, King, great and holy are you. Blessed are you, Lord, the holy God. Right? Now notice this, the chatima, the closing blessing, is exactly the same as what we had earlier, as the as when we were doing the personal prayer. So what is different is all of this stuff earlier, right? The proclamation of God's holiness, which we're told that God can only be, the holiness of God's name is only done in public, which is why we need a minyan in order to do it. Okay. Now let's talk about physical motions during this prayer. Okay, so look at the top. We have the angels calling to one another, right? V'kara zeh el zeh ne'amar, right? Who's calling to each other? Right. This is from Isaiah's vision. This is Karazel Zev Amar is already from Isaiah. He's describing what he is seeing. So who's doing this?
Angels, I think.
The angel, right? The Seraphim, right? So all these angels kind of lined up, maybe in a circle or something. What are they doing? They're calling to each other, right? They're instructing each other to sing God's holiness. That's the scene that Isaiah has painted. So it's customary for us to do something similar. We're behaving like angels. Right. So we've got to channel our inner seraph, right? And imagine that the people around us are also doing the same thing. And so what people will do is vikara zeh el zeh, right? So kind of a short little kind of a head bow or head nod to the left and to the right, because we're turning to the angels who are to our left and to our right. Making sure that they're on board, they're ready to go, right? Now, sometimes you will see people sometimes doing a third one, right? That's wrong, right? There's only two zez, right? This side and this side, right? I mean, the pacing feels like it should go. There should be a third one, but there isn't, right? It's just two, and just imagine the scene. And I think that these physical motions that we do during this prayer help us, right? It helps bring us, kind of elevate us into that throne room. Next is kadosh, 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 right? So this, people rise up on tiptoes. Once for each kadosh, right? Kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. And then similarly on the Baruch line, again, rise up on tiptoes. And then finally on the Yimloch line, also rising up on tiptoes, right? We're elevating ourselves just like the angels. Now, in terms of order of who says what when, you'll hear different you'll hear differences between one person and the next. So sometimes you'll hear, let's say, all right, so we get to this Kedusha, the leader pauses, the congregation recites the Nekadesh line, then the leader solo recites the Nekadesh line and pauses at Ve'amar. Then the congregation says the Kadosh line, then the leader repeats Kadosh and goes on to Umatam. Then the congregation does Baruch, the leader then repeats Baruch and goes on to the next line, U'divrei Kodshecha. Then the congregation does Yimloch and the leader then repeats Yimloch and then finishes with the Lador Vador line at the end, right? Or sometimes you'll hear the leader reciting the congregational parts along with the congregation, different versions. I'm not sure that one is correct or incorrect. In some communities, there is a concern about not repeating words in prayers, right? So that might be a consideration if, the leader says a line and then does the congregation sing along with the leader when the leader's repeating it afterwards. So you'll see different practices in different communities.
What does it mean when it says, from our mouths shall never depart?
the recitation of God's holiness, right? The proclaiming of God as holy, right? I think it's just another kind of metaphor. It's not really a metaphor, but it's a figurative way of saying forever.
Oh, okay.
Right. I mean,
it almost seems to me it's saying we'll never stop saying this.
Yeah, we're never going to stop.
Okay.
Right. Every generation. This is our job as people, as Israel, in our covenantal relationship with God.
Okay.
All right. Any questions on this? So there's different versions of the Kedusha, lots and lots of different versions of the Kedusha. We've talked about how in the early centuries of Jewish worship, especially in the land of Israel, there was tremendous variation. And the person who was educated enough to lead prayers was also educated enough to compose individual compositions, perhaps even on a weekly basis, right? Because this stuff isn't written down in Siddurim, so there's a lot of room for flexibility. And so there are certain parts of the service which were especially especially utilized for these personal compositions, these piyutim. And this is one of them. The Kedusha, the beginning of the Amidah, and especially the Kedusha, was one of them. And so you would have, extensive elaborations, very often in very complicated, sophisticated poetry on God's holiness. And we have some remnants of this that we're familiar with. So on the high holidays, Unatana Tokef, right? The prayer when we kind of envision God reading from the book of remembrance and the sheep passing underneath God to be counted and numbered. That is a Kedushta, right? It's a piyut that introduces the Kedusha in the Musaf Amidah. And so you'll see that in our Machzor, the Unatana Tokef with the prayers that come immediately afterwards span over 2 pages and lead immediately into the Kedusha. And liturgically, they're functioning as an introduction to the Kedusha. And it seems that there were lots of these piyutim that were written, in the early Middle Ages, and sometimes they were written with picking up on themes from the Parsha of that week. We've lost a lot of them, but the Geniza has been a really important source of material for finding a lot of these versions. Now, there were some versions that had better lasting power. So this is one of them, right? This is a relatively short version, and so it got incorporated into the weekday liturgy for Ashkenazi Jews. We've got a Shabbat and festival version. This one's different, all right? So in this one, it's on page 116 in the Siddur for Shabbat. I put in smaller font the parts that are the same. So the Nekadesh starts the same. But then after the Srafim have their say with the Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh line, then we get something different, right? And what this is a different version, a different Kedushta, a different series of prayers surrounding the 3 verses that were popular. And then in the Ashkenazi tradition, these got included as, at a certain point it became fixed. And so now we have this to this day. So Az bekol ra'ash gadol adir v'chazak mashmi'im kol. All right, so I love this line. Az is then bekol. Kol means voice. Ra'ash means loud. Gadol means great. Adir means, strong or powerful. Chazak is strong. Mashmi'im means to make heard, right? To produce sound. Kol, again, we have voice, right? So we're not beating around the bush here. It was loud.
It's a great line.
Right? Right. Then in a mighty and powerful, great loud voice, they make their voice heard. Okay. It's great. Mitnasim lu'umat serafim. Mitnasim is to lift themselves up. Lu'umat serafim, towards the serafim. Lu'umatam baruch yomeru. Facing them, they say blessed. Now, for weekdays, we only had the lu'umatam baruch yomeru. But now we get in this elaboration, we get a better scene, right? It's the Ofanim who have just heard the Seraphim proclaim their Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. And I mean, like, you know, I think this is like a sing-off is not an exaggerate. Like that's what it is, right? They just heard the Seraphim do it. And so now they're facing the Seraphim and they're going to be as loud as they can to, you know, even though they have fewer words to say, they're going to make sure that they are heard. So I learned from
Rabbi,
yeah.
Is this the one for festivals?
And Shabbat and festivals.
Okay.
During Shacharit only, not during
that
Musaf.
would be in the Shabbat would be on 123, 24.
It'll be on either
116.
116 or 124. It'll be the same.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I heard from my cantor growing up, cantor Brad Kurland, and I learned this from him and have tried to incorporate it, that when we're davening, we should make the way that we daven reflect meaning whenever possible. So az bekol ra'ash gadol, then in a sound with a great and powerful noise, right? So you got to get loud. So what he does, and I've taken this from az bekol ra'ash gadol, right?
Oh, I thought you were always just exercising your vocal cords.
Well, I am, but that's what the words mean, right? That's what the Ofanim were doing. So
thank you.
So
nice. Yeah.
Good. Whoever wrote this was having fun. I mean, I would have to think they were having fun with the language and going overboard with it. Okay, so then we've got the Ofanim have their say, and then we get another elaboration. Instead of just saying Uvdivrei kodshecha katuv lemor, right? And in your holy words, it is written saying, now we have this even bigger elaboration. And I think I need to move my head. Okay. Mimekomecha, from your place, Malkeinu Tefilah, our king. Tefilah means appear, right? We want you to appear, God. V'timloch aleinu, and reign over us. Ki mechakim anachnu lach, because we're waiting for you. Matai timloch b'tzion, when will you reign over Zion or in Zion? B'karov b'yameinu, soon, let it be soon, in our day. Leolam va'ed tishkon, and then you'll dwell there forever. Titkadal v'titkadash b'toch Yerushalayim ircha, you will be magnified and sanctified. You'll be made great. You'll be made great and holy within Jerusalem, your city. Ledor vador, throughout all generations, ulenetzach netzachim, and forever and ever. Right? Ve'einenu tirena malchutecha, and our eyes will behold your kingdom. Kadavar ha'amur b'shirei uzecha, as is written in your songs of glory, al yedei David Mashiach tzidkecha, by David, your anointed one of righteousness. All right. Okay. What is this saying? It's got a lot to say.
You know, I think of the word reign, R-E-I-G-N, and a play on that, R-A-I-N, also could mean something, you know. But
yeah. Well, this is seems to be expressing some messianic aspirations, something we didn't see in the weekday up at this point, but it gets here and specifically focusing on a return to Jerusalem.
Rabbi, so
yes.
The Kedushat for Shabbat and for festival is the same, but not the Amidah. The Amidah is different for festivals, correct?
No. Amidah means standing prayer. On Shabbat and on festivals, there are two Amidahs, right?
Right.
There's the one in Shacharit,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the one in Musaf.
And Musaf.
We're not talking about Musaf right now.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
But
so
what I'm saying is
that this version with the Az B'Kol and Mim Komcha, that is the version that is done in Shacharit for both Shabbat and festivals.
Yes.
All right. Musaf is different. Musaf is something different.
Yeah, but I'm saying the Shacharit and the festival Shacharit Amidah are different, or are they both the same?
Sorry, are you talking about weekday?
No, I'm talking about Shabbat. The Shabbat Shacharit Amidah and the Shabbat Amidah for festivals is the same, or is it different?
Well, let's look. Compare 116 and 124.
116. No, I'm talking about the Amidah, not the Kedushat.
Well, the Kedushat is part of the Amidah.
Yeah, but when we start out with Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech, the first part of 115 is the Shacharit Amidah before we get to the Kedushat.
Yeah, that's identical for every Amidah.
Okay, so it's not different for festivals.
No.
Okay,
no.
That's what
now,
I want to.
The section after the Kedusha is different. That's unique to the particular day.
Right. Oh, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay, got it. Okay, so all right, let's take a look at another version. This is the Sephardic weekday version, right? So there's some variations. Oh, actually, let me just point one other thing out. The in the line from Psalms, the Lord will reign forever, your God Zion in every generation. So we see this mention of Zion in the verse in Psalms, and it would seem that this is focusing on Zion and Jerusalem in the previous paragraph because it's picking up on anticipating the line from Psalms that's coming up next. Okay, now let's look at the weekday version in the Sephardi tradition. You'll see some similar words, but some slight differences. And what we can point to different prayer traditions that were preserved in Sephardim as for Ashkenazim that are kind of coming out of this early period before things kind of got locked down. So the Sephardim begin Nakdishach v'na'aritzach. We will sanctify you and revere you. Kenoam siach sod sarfei kodesh, like the pleasant conversation of the holy seraphs, the holy seraphim. Hameshalashim lecha kedusha. Meshalashim. So if you may notice the word shalosh in there. So this is the verb of shalosh. I don't think we have that in English.
3 times.
But to turn the number 3 into a verb.
Oh, into a verb. Oh, no.
Rice? No.
No. So
rice is not a verb.
So Hameshalashim is to triple. Maybe it's to triple.
Triple, there you go.
Hameshalashim lecha kedusha. The ones who triple holiness for you. Something. That would be a more literal translation. But what do? They're reciting 3 times. They're proclaiming God's holiness 3 times. Kakatu v'yad neviyecha, as it is written in your prophet. And now we quote Isaiah, v'karazeh el zev yamar, right? They call one to the other saying, and here's the triple, kadosh, 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 right? The threefold proclamation of holiness. So that's a slightly different version for the Sephardim. I kind of like this version better. They first of all they name the seraphim. They give them props. They name them, and they talk about how pleasant is the way that they're speaking with each other. Right? It's noam siach, pleasant conversation. Right? And then a slight variation in this next line, L'umatam mishabachim ve'omrim. So the Ashkenazi said, Lu'umatam Baruch Yomeru. Facing them, they say Baruch. Here it's those facing them praise and say. Right? Kind of the same idea. And then this one's the same. Udvrei kodshecha katuv lemor. At the end, notice we don't get the Lador Vador passage. Ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh ukroshim b'chol yom yehalalucha sela. That's identical to the individual's version of the Kedusha, what we say by ourselves. And then it adds, Ki el melech gadol v'kadosh ata. That's from the what we know as the Lador Vador paragraph, right? For God, King, great and holy are you. And then we conclude with the same closing blessing. Baruch atah Hashem ha'el kadosh. Nothing radically different in terms of theme, but we've got some different linguistic traditions here that we've preserved. Any questions about the Kedusha? Anything from people's experiences with the Kedusha that you've always wondered about?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Before, on the slide before, you show we say Matai Timloch Betzion. When you're going to reign upon Zion. Matai Timloch Betzion. Matai Timloch Betzion. It means when you're going to reign over Zion. So it's understood that at some point God stopped reigning on Zion. Is that point was the destruction of the temple?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, this is a theme that we see lots of places in our liturgy. We saw it already in right before the Shema. All right, you'll bring us together in peace from the four corners of the earth, right? So this idea of the ingathering of the exiles here, since we're channeling the angels, and because Isaiah's vision occurred in the temple in Jerusalem, so this seems like a pretty good place to talk about God returning to the temple. It's a reference, to a restoration and a rebuilding of the Holy of Holies, where maybe a future prophet can have a similar kind of experience.
On my Reform hat, we use the same cantillation that you do in conservative. So was that from the Masoretic text, or do we think, I'm just thinking about this because of your saying that we had to have something said for the people who were illiterate so they could just say amen. So chanting things make it easier to remember things.
Yeah.
So was just at the time, when do you think that the chanting tunes came fixed? I guess that would be the question.
Are they the same as they?
Let me answer two different questions. First is the question you didn't ask, which is, it reminded me. I suspect that people had these three lines memorized, right? You can memorizing a line's easy.
Yes.
Right? So, and so the stuff in between would be the prayer leader really providing introductions, lead-ins, so that the congregation will now know what they need to say and be able to say it at the appropriate place. Now you're asking about melodies. So there's the concept of nusach. Nusach means tradition, but it has to do with the musical mode for a particular service, right? So on weekdays, right? That's the Ashkenazi weekday nusach that I learned. I suspect it's from southern Germany. On Shabbat, right? So that's for Shabbat, and these tunes are considered to be Misinai tunes, right? From Sinai tunes, right? Are they from Sinai? No. but they're old, right? And they feel like they should be. So we say that they are Misinai tunes, but if you went to different communities, they're going to have different melodies for these. And I think in Ashkenazi traditions tend to have more variety in terms of nusach, having a different nusach for lots of different parts of the service. In Sephardim, it may be fewer total numbers of nuschaot in the tradition. So and then there's melody, right? So people are always writing new melodies, and some of the melodies that we have are centuries old. And as you know, there are some melodies that are being written every day and that are being utilized in liturgy. And I think that's always been the case. At some point, every one of our songs had a composer.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that I listen for is, in terms of a melody, is that the melody fits into the mode of the service.
Yeah.
Right. So if on Shabbat, right? If we're going to put a melody in next, it should fit that mode. Otherwise, it'll sound disjunctive. It'll sound like it doesn't fit. Now, for a lot of people, they might not notice it, right? I think it's probably just the musical snobs that pick up on this stuff. But I can tell you that a lot of composers, certainly a lot of kind of the classic cantorial composers, when they're making new melodies, they in fact are very aware of nusach, and many of the melodies that they are composing and leading with are in the appropriate mode. I'll just we can maybe end with this. When we're talking about mode, on Shabbat, the Kedusha for Shacharit has a different mode than the Kedusha for Musaf.
Aye.
All right. And you probably know it. All right. So if the Karazel Zeh Amar, Kadosh, 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 right? It's in the same mode, right? It's called Phrygian. Which is, it's called Phrygish, which is similar to the ancient Greek Phrygian mode. Not exactly the same, but similar. For Musaf, the Kedusha is in major, or something close to major. So how does the beginning start? Instead of, what do we start with? It's very bright.
Yeah.
Right? Very major. And now we need to stay major. So what do we do? There you go, Sherry. Sing it, right? In major. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Very major. It has that bright, majestic kind of feeling, which is different than Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Much.
So is the idea that throughout the service you become more kind of holy, inspired, and by the end you have a bright ending to your service, so you feel very
uplifted,
bright and full.
I think that there's probably some truth to that. That major mode that Musaf is in is also the same mode that much of the Torah service is in. Think of Ein Kamocha. Ein Kamocha, right? Very major, right? Yeah. And it's supposed to be majestic. It's supposed to be like we're in the throne room, and actually that mode is carried over from high holidays, right? So a lot of the high holiday liturgy is also in that major mode. And so what we do during the Torah service on Shabbat kind of evokes what's going on during the high holidays.
And how do you feel about Adon Olam to the William Tell overture?
I love the William Tell overture, and I love Adon Olam.
But they don't match up.
They don't match at all.
Of course. I agree with you. It's pretty weird.
Yeah, I mean, Adon Olam is such a beautiful poem.
Yeah.
And it's so existential.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the melodies that are used for it
I really
seem
like
to not reflect.
Yeah, I agree.
But you want to involve the kids also, and the fact that we threw it at the end of the service like that should be get some indication that when it was included in the Siddur, it wasn't considered to be a super important prayer.
Yeah.
So I just kind of tacked on to the end, but yeah, I don't know. For me, a snob, I do pay attention to music and melody and to what how the music reflects the meaning of the words and just the flow of the service. I think it matters. I think when done well, I think it does make a difference for a congregation that is praying.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So this is a good place to stop. We are done with the Kedushat. Next week, we are going to look at the central sections of the Amidah, and we're going to try to discover this business about the Shmona Esrei, the blessing of 18, in fact, having 19 blessings.
Okay.
And where that comes from and why and how we've been wrong for the last 1,800 years.
There's that 818 again.
Yeah.
All
right. So let's say happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you very